But Shirley Jones had my father banned from the set.
She wasn't just Christie's mom on TV. She was playing a role while silently watching her real-life stepson spiral. When Danny's chaos, bouncing dishes, midnight tantrums, unfiltered blurts, pushed her too far, Shirley Jones made a stunning decision. She would never work with him again. The real reason? It's darker than you ever imagined. It looked perfect on screen. Shirley Jones, radiant and composed, playing the wholesome matriarch in the Partridge family. She sang, she smiled, she held the fictional family together. But behind the lights and applause, Shirley was hiding a growing discomfort, one that involved the smallest, most unpredictable star of the show, Danny Bonaduce. Danny wasn't just another child actor to Shirley. He was her real-life stepson, the son of her then-husband, Jack Cassidy. And unlike the sweet, quick-witted kid the audience adored on screen, Danny was a storm behind the scenes. Shirley, who had built her career on discipline, charm, and professionalism, suddenly found herself dealing with chaos she couldn't control. The unsettling secret was that Shirley wasn't just acting like a mother to Danny, she was forced to be one. Danny's home life was fractured, marked by abuse and volatility, and Shirley stepped in more than once to give him a safe place to stay. For a while, she tried to take him under her wing, even letting him live with her at times. But the darker truth was that Danny's unpredictable behavior followed them everywhere, even to set. It was more than mischief. He had an energy that could flip from charming to destructive in seconds. While Shirley was expected to anchor the show, Danny was cracking jokes, pushing buttons, and at times, creating tension that left her exhausted. Crew members whispered about Shirley's patience, some saying she was more of a referee than a co-star. What few realized was that this constant push and pull was wearing her down. For Shirley, who prided herself on keeping things graceful, Danny's volatility became a private nightmare. And even though the cameras never caught it, her frustration was real, and it was growing. Shirley kept her composure, because the show demanded it. But deep down, she was already thinking, this can't last forever. She wasn't just battling long filming schedules or the pressure of stardom. She was battling the storm that came with having Danny both as family and co-star. And the whispers didn't stop at the studio doors. Friends and colleagues began to notice that Shirley looked more tired, more burdened whenever Danny was around. What the world saw as a glowing television mom was, in reality, a woman silently drowning in responsibility. She carried the weight of keeping the illusion alive, but her private thoughts were darker. How much longer can I keep this up? But if Shirley thought she could manage it quietly, she was wrong, because what came next on set made it impossible to ignore. The cameras loved Danny Bonaduce. His quick wit, mischievous grin, and one-liners made him a fan favorite. Viewers thought he was just a funny kid, playing the smart Alec brother. But Shirley Jones knew the truth. Those sharp quips often came from a much darker place. Behind the laughter was a child actor carrying scars that no sitcom could hide. Danny's home life was brutal. He's spoken openly in later years about the abuse he suffered at the hands of his father, Jack Cassidy. That pain didn't just stay behind closed doors. It spilled into every part of his personality. He craved attention, and when he didn't get it, he made sure to steal it. Sometimes it was harmless, like interrupting a scene with a joke, but other times it went too far. Shirley found herself caught in the middle. As both his stepmother and his co-star, she felt a responsibility to protect him, but it came with a heavy cost. There were moments during filming when Danny's outbursts derailed entire scenes. Crew members would groan, directors would roll their eyes, but Shirley had to keep her smile plastered on for the camera. The audience saw a happy family, but Shirley saw a boy unraveling. And then there were the whispers. Castmates and crew reportedly noticed that Shirley's demeanor shifted whenever Danny was around. What looked like maternal warmth to the public was, at times, Shirley walking on eggshells. She worried about what he might do next, whether he'd sabotage a scene or whether he'd lash out at someone on set. For her, every filming day was a balancing act, holding the family image together while trying to manage Danny's unpredictability. The situation blurred the lines between family and work in a way Shirley never anticipated. It wasn't just a job anymore. It was constant emotional labor, and it was exhausting. Shirley's patience began to thin, and though she rarely admitted it publicly, resentment started to creep in. She had signed on to play America's sweetheart mom, not to play therapist, babysitter, and damage control all at once. Still, Shirley held back. She never confronted Danny directly on set, never let her guard down in front of the cameras. She protected the image. But the truth was clear to anyone who looked closely. There was strain in her eyes, strain that no sitcom laugh track could cover. But what really pushed Shirley over the edge wasn't just Danny's behavior. It was what happened when she invited him into her personal life. And that's when the story took a shocking turn. At first, Shirley Jones believed she was doing the right thing. She had seen what Danny Bonaduce endured at home. The shouting, the bruising discipline, the emotional scars no child should ever carry. For Shirley, who was already raising 3 sons of her own, stepping in felt natural. She invited Danny into her home, offering him a stability he wasn't getting from his own father. It was her way of saying, "You're safe here." For a little while, it worked. Danny loved the comfort, the meals, and the attention that came with Shirley's household. But soon, Shirley realized she hadn't just opened her home. She'd opened Pandora's box. Danny brought with him the same whirlwind energy that shook the set of the Partridge Family. Only now, it wasn't confined to studio hours. It was 24/7. He could be sweet one moment and explosive the next. There were stories of Danny raiding the kitchen in the middle of the night, pulling pranks on Shirley's kids, and stirring up chaos that never seemed to end. Shirley, who already carried the weight of being a Hollywood star and mother, now had to manage another child who demanded more attention than all the others combined. The hardest part was the blurred boundary. At work, Danny was her co-star. At home, he was her stepson. Shirley couldn't separate the two, and that confusion created tension that lingered everywhere she went. When Danny misbehaved on set, Shirley carried that frustration home. When he disrupted her household, she carried that exhaustion back to the studio. It was a vicious cycle that wore her thin, and yet Shirley kept trying. Her instinct to protect him never completely faded. No matter how drained she felt, she defended him to producers when they complained. She reminded her own kids to be patient with him. She tried to convince herself that if she just gave him enough love, he might calm down, maybe even heal. But deep down, Shirley started to realize the truth. Her attempts to rescue Danny weren't saving him. They were slowly drowning her. Every day felt heavier, every interaction more strained. What began as a noble act of compassion was morphing into regret, though Shirley wouldn't dare admit it out loud. Still, the breaking point hadn't come yet. That would arrive when Danny's chaos spilled out in front of everyone, on set, in moments so disruptive that even Shirley's famous patience began to shatter. And when it happened, there was no going back. The Partridge Family set was supposed to be lighthearted. Songs, laughter, the kind of wholesome environment that made audiences feel like they were watching America's perfect family. But once the cameras stopped rolling, Danny Bonaduce often turned the studio into a circus, and Shirley Jones was stuck in the middle. He was unpredictable. One day, he'd be the comic relief everyone adored, lifting spirits between takes. The next, he'd be throwing tantrums, cracking inappropriate jokes, or pushing the patience of every adult in the room. Crew members recalled him testing boundaries constantly, and while some brushed it off as typical child star antics, Shirley saw it differently. To her, it wasn't just mischief, it was chaos eating away at the show's harmony. There were stories of Danny hurling props around, turning rehearsal into playtime, or picking fights with fellow cast members. What looked like a goofy grin on screen often masked a deeper frustration bubbling beneath the surface. And Shirley, who had taken Danny under her wing at home, was expected to absorb the fallout here, too. Producers leaned on her, believing she could keep him in line. But every time she stepped in, it chipped away at her resolve. Even in moments when Shirley tried to laugh it off, the stress lingered. She was juggling her role as the polished star, a surrogate mother, and at times, a reluctant disciplinarian. More than once, she found herself exhausted from the dual roles, her patience running dangerously thin. And what the audience never knew was that the very chemistry that made the show a hit was also fueling resentment behind closed doors. The worst moments came when Danny's outbursts disrupted entire shooting days. Scenes had to be reshot, schedules rearranged, and tempers cooled. Each time, Shirley was the one caught in the crossfire, expected to smile for the cameras while dealing with the storm brewing just off set. For her, it stopped being acting. It became survival. Over time, the joy she once felt performing was replaced with quiet dread. The set, meant to be a creative escape, became a place she associated with tension and unpredictability. The maternal instinct that drove her to protect Danny at home now felt like a chore, both professionally and personally. She was running out of energy, and worse, she was running out of patience. And then it happened. The moment where all of Shirley's bottled-up frustration finally reached its limit. A moment so defining that she made a silent vow. Once this show ended, she would never, under any circumstance, work with Danny Bonaduce again. Every parent has their limits, even one as graceful and composed as Shirley Jones. For years, she juggled her duties as star of the Partridge family, while managing the unpredictable whirlwind that was Danny Bonaduce. But there was one moment, one incident, that finally convinced her it was over. Accounts vary, but story goes that Danny's behavior escalated to a point that could no longer be brushed off as harmless antics. Some insiders claim he snapped during a rehearsal, storming off in a fit of rage after mocking a crew member. Others recall him openly defying direction, talking back to producers in a way that left the room in stunned silence. What everyone agrees on is this: Shirley had reached her breaking point. She didn't explode. That wasn't her style. Instead, she grew quiet, calm, and decisive. After years of patience, years of balancing compassion with frustration, Shirley drew a line in her mind. Once the cameras stopped rolling for good, she would not work with Danny again. The line between stepmother and co-star had blurred beyond repair, and the toll it took on her spirit wasn't something she wanted to relive. It wasn't just the outbursts that broke her. It was the constant pressure. Shirley had carried the weight of Danny's trauma, his volatility, and his need for attention. She had sacrificed her own peace to keep him afloat, all while maintaining the image of America's perfect mom on television. It was draining, thankless, and in the end, unsustainable. Some believe Shirley's silence after the show said it all. While other cast members occasionally reunited or reminisced fondly, Shirley's distance from Danny was noticeable. She didn't publicly criticize him. She didn't have to. Her refusal to work with him again spoke louder than any interview ever could. And Danny? He noticed. Over the years, he's admitted to being a difficult child, even acknowledging that Shirley's patience was saint-like compared to what he deserved. But by then, the damage was done. The warmth she once extended had hardened into a quiet boundary. That silent vow, never again, wasn't just about Danny. It was about Shirley reclaiming her sanity, her dignity, and her career. She had played the role of caretaker, but she refused to let it define the rest of her life. Still, her decision sparked endless questions. Was it just about his behavior on set, or was there something deeper? Rumors began to swirl, whispers of jealousy, resentment, and hidden tensions that the public never saw. And that's where the story takes an even darker turn. Once the Partridge family wrapped, Shirley Jones and Danny Bonaduce went their separate ways. But the silence between them only fueled speculation. Why didn't Shirley appear in reunion projects alongside Danny? Why did she seem to keep her distance, even as other cast members occasionally reconnected? Fans began to wonder if there was more to the story than a few tantrums and on-set tension. Some insiders whispered that Shirley resented how Danny often stole the spotlight. Remember, this was supposed to be David Cassidy's breakout, with Shirley as the elegant anchor. But it was Danny, the cheeky redhead with the fast mouth, who often snagged the punchlines and became a fan favorite. Shirley, a seasoned Oscar-winning actress, may have quietly bristled at watching her carefully built reputation take a back seat to the antics of a child actor. Others speculated that Shirley's refusal to work with Danny again wasn't just about him being difficult. It was about her exhaustion from playing dual roles. She had been both his stepmother and his co-star, and that blurred line weighed heavier than anyone realized. Rumor had it that even off-camera, she dreaded being around him because it reminded her of the turbulent marriage she had endured with Jack Cassidy, Danny's father. To Shirley, Danny was a living reminder of the chaos she desperately wanted to leave behind. Then came the memoirs. In her autobiography, Shirley wrote candidly about her life in Hollywood, her marriage to Jack, and the challenges of raising a family in the spotlight. While she didn't outright condemn Danny, her carefully chosen words hinted at regret. She admitted that taking him into her home was a strain, one she hadn't fully anticipated. To some readers, it sounded like a veiled acknowledgement that Danny had been too much for her to handle. Meanwhile, Danny himself has spoken over the years about how destructive he was as a child. He admitted to being wild, disrespectful, and impossible to manage. In interviews, he's joked about how Shirley deserved a medal just for tolerating him. But beneath the humor, his admissions seemed to confirm what the rumors suggested. Shirley had every reason to draw a boundary. Still, speculation didn't end there. Some tabloids floated the idea that Shirley actively avoided Partridge family reunions because she didn't want to deal with Danny's erratic adult behavior either. After all, his post-show years were riddled with controversy, run-ins with the law, substance struggles, and wild public antics. If Shirley had decided once that she couldn't handle him as a child, why would she risk putting herself back in his orbit as an adult? For decades, fans pieced together fragments of truth from rumors, memoirs, and offhand comments. But the clearest answer, the real reason Shirley Jones said never again, wouldn't surface until much later, when she finally pulled back the curtain on her own terms. For years, Shirley Jones kept her silence. She never went on talk shows to slam Danny Bonaduce, never sold him out to tabloids, never aired the dirty laundry in public. To the casual fan, it seemed like there was no feud at all, just distance. But behind that silence was a decision carved in stone. And as time passed, Shirley began to hint at the truth in ways that could no longer be ignored. In her memoir, Shirley finally peeled back a layer. She wrote about the chaos of raising children while working in Hollywood, the exhaustion of managing a troubled stepson, and the quiet heartbreak of realizing she couldn't fix him. While she stopped short of naming Danny directly in certain passages, the implication was clear. He had been part of the reason she often felt overwhelmed, trapped between her role as a caregiver and her desire to simply be an actress again. Later interviews gave even sharper glimpses. Shirley admitted that while she loved Danny, working with him had been very difficult. She revealed that she often had to absorb the fallout of his behavior on set, smoothing things over with producers and castmates when his antics crossed the line. She explained how hard it was to keep her composure when she was already stretched thin, both as a mother and a performer. And though she delivered it gently, her words carried weight. It wasn't healthy for her to work with Danny again. Meanwhile, Danny himself has filled in pieces of the puzzle. He has spoken candidly about his self-destructive behavior as a child and beyond, his addictions, his arrests, his constant need for chaos. He often frames it with humor, but beneath the jokes is an acknowledgement. Shirley had every reason to step away. In fact, Danny has admitted that Shirley was one of the few people who ever truly cared about him, and that he probably burned that bridge long before he even realized it. Put together, the picture becomes clear. Shirley Jones didn't cut ties with Danny out of bitterness, jealousy, or spite. She did it to protect herself. She had spent years carrying the weight of his turmoil, shielding him when no one else would, and trying to be both mother and co-star in a situation that demanded far too much of her. By the end of the Partridge family, she knew she had given all she could, and that she couldn't survive giving any more. And so the hidden truth isn't a scandal splashed across headlines. It's something quieter, something heavier. Shirley Jones refused to ever work with Danny Bonaduce again because she had already sacrificed too much of herself in the process. She chose peace over chaos, stability over volatility, and silence over another storm. But that silence, the calm after the storm, has left fans wondering for decades. What would have happened if Shirley had said yes one more time? Would it have reignited the old magic, or reopened wounds that never fully healed?